Good morning, everyone. If you can please take your seats, we will start the program today. I'm Casey Koenig, Senior Vice President and Chief Lending Officer at the Bank of Prairie du Sac. On behalf of the bank and chamber, welcome to our 2025 Economic Outlook event, and thank you for coming. The Bank of Prairie partners in this event as it is important for local businesses and residents to hear what the economy may bring in the upcoming year. It is crucial to utilize this information for your 2025 budget, vision, and plan. I want to also thank today the Mixing Bowl Bakery. They provided our desserts over here, muffins, as well as John Joseph Coffee for providing the coffee today. Today, we will be hearing updates from local leaders, as well as from Dr. Stephen Deller on the economic outlook locally and nationally. Dr. Stephen Deller is a Vilas Distinguished Award Achievement Professor and joined the University of Wisconsin-Madison faculty in 1993. He is a professor in the Department of Agricultural and Applied Economics at UW-Madison and a Community Economic Development Specialist within the UW-Madison Extension. His work is in the broad area of community economic development with a focus on smaller communities and rural areas. Dr. Deller's slides are available by scanning the QR code that you will find located on your table 10. I also have the privilege of serving on the Chamber's Board of Directors and Economic Development Committee. Today, I'm excited to share some incredible progress, both accomplishments we celebrate in 2024 and exciting projects coming in 2025. Let's start with the Chamber. What a year it's been. We continue to see growth that reflects the strength and resilience of our business community. 40 new members joined us in 2024, bringing our membership to 382 local businesses and growing. 76% of our members actively engaged by attending events, showing how committed you are to building connections and supporting each other. One of the most impactful moments this year came from a project discussed at the Economic Development Committee for more than 24 months, addressing the need for childcare to support workforce recruitment and retention. Thanks to many of you in this room, we broke ground on a 168-child early learning facility, a milestone that will create long-term benefits for families and employers. You'll hear more about this in today's video. Investing in workforce development. We also tackled workforce challenges head-on by investing in regional talent recruitment. With a $20,000 grant from the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, matched by dollars approved by the Chamber Board, we launched a $40,000 advertising campaign to promote local employers and job opportunities. The results? Over 350 jobs posted, and 31,000 visits to saukprairie.com to explore employment options. Even more encouraging, our job board trends improved, dropping from a consistent average of 100 plus open positions locally since 2020 to just 50 today. Looking ahead, we're keeping momentum strong. In 2025, the Chamber Board has approved $15,000 to continue regional marketing efforts for local jobs. If your HR teams haven't yet tapped into this resource, now's the time. Talk to Chamber staff, and let's keep building on this success. Driving local spending. We also want to celebrate a big win for small businesses, Chamber Buck sales. In 2024, we sold $165,000 in Chamber Bucks, a 39% increase over 2023. This program keeps money circulating locally, returning 3 times the value to our community. It's worth noting the Chamber absorbs the cost of this program to make it free for participants. A true commitment to supporting local businesses. Thank you for encouraging customers to shop local and helping us sustain a thriving business environment. Celebrating community connections. This year, our annual dinner, community expo, women's event, spring swing, Chamber Bowl, and kickball tournament all sold out. Proof that we're stronger when we come together. To all of you, thank you. Your partnership, energy, and dedication continue to fuel progress in the Sauk Prairie Riverway. Our efforts are paying off, and we're just getting started. I can't wait for you to hear more on the 2025 State of the Riverway report. And I look forward to working alongside you as we keep building an even brighter future. Thank you.
Bold, collaborative, future-focused. This is Sauk Prairie. Just 20 minutes northwest of Madison, Sauk Prairie is a vibrant community where innovation and small-town charm meet the beauty of the Wisconsin River. With a drive for progress, we're shaping a future that's stronger, smarter, and even more exciting than before. Whether you're a developer, a community leader, or a family seeking your next chapter, come see why Sauk Prairie is the place where possibilities meet reality.
Hi, I'm Ken Waddell. This is my wife, Katie, and we are new residents in Sauk Prairie.
We were really attracted to the Sauk Prairie area mostly because of the school system. We were looking for that small town feel again. For us, it just came down to projection of where do we think this is going? Is this going to be what we want it to be still in 5, 10, 15 years? Is there room for growth, but not such a rapid growth that it loses its charm?
Living in Sauk Prairie, you're only 20, 25 minutes from the Madison area. So for a lot of those type of things, they are still there. But for that small town charm feeling that we were looking for, this way we get really the best of both worlds.
We're not just building homes, we're building futures. From our thriving business parks to state-of-the-art schools and cutting-edge infrastructure, Sauk Prairie is a place where opportunity and quality of life go hand in hand. Our school district is committed to enhancing our facilities while making a positive impact on both the budget and the environment. Recently, we took a significant step forward by installing a 150 kilowatt-hour solar array on the roof of Sauk Prairie High School, generating clean energy and contributing to our sustainability goals. This solar initiative is part of a larger investment exceeding $70 million since 2020 in new instructional spaces, athletic and arts facilities, and vital infrastructure, resulting in modern, efficient, and inviting buildings. However, the most exciting developments are happening inside those instructional spaces. Thanks to a grant from the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation and strong partnerships with local employers and Madison College, Sauk Prairie High School is leading the way in innovative workforce development. Our programs are specifically designed to meet student interests and community needs with a focus on advanced manufacturing, agricultural science, and medical careers. Together, we're shaping a brighter future for our students and our community. In 2024, local villages committed over $4.3 million to vital street upgrades, including complete reconstructions and new infrastructure of 5th Street and VFW Drive in Prairie du Sac and South Water Street in Sauk City. We are being intentional to connect people and places. In a first-of-its-kind collaboration between two counties, the Wisconsin River Recreational Bridge will connect the iconic Great Sauk State Trail with the first leg of the new Walking Iron Trail in Dane County, the 500-foot landmark being built for use by pedestrians, cyclists, and snowmobilers will span a corridor over the Wisconsin River formerly occupied by a century-old railroad bridge. With new businesses and investments driving our growth in Sauk Prairie, it is the place to invest, grow, and thrive. As we celebrate new spaces and beginnings, we also celebrate owners Tricia Robb and Jesse Steinberg, seasoned entrepreneurs from Madison who have brought a wealth of experience and passion to a riverside restaurant venue.
Hi there, I'm Tricia Robb. My business partner, Jesse Steinberg, and I are very excited to welcome you to our new venture, Water Street Social Club. The way I would describe Water Street Social Club is that we really focus on eat, drink, and gather. We focus very much on fresh ingredients. We support local vendors as much as we can. We have music a couple nights a week. We also host trivia nights, we host karaoke nights. The biggest draw of this location was the amazing Wisconsin River. To anyone who's looking to relocate their business or forge a business in the Sauk area, I would say go for it. This community has been so wonderful to us. They're so welcoming. It's such an easy drive if you're commuting, and it's a beautiful location. And I think it's really up and coming. I think that was a big thing for us, is that there's a lot going on here in town, and people are really excited to be in this community, and people are so wonderful, so welcoming, that I would say absolutely become part of the Sauk Prairie community.
At the heart of our economic growth, existing businesses are investing in our community and expanding their reach. Local companies grew in 2024 and decided to grow even further by expanding their footprint right here in our business park.
I'm Teddy Gary. I'm the CEO of Saltco. Saltco is a company that provides water softening salt delivery for commercial and industrial customers throughout the Midwest. This building that we're designing is going to fit our needs from the office all the way back to actually building the specialized trucks that we use. The first phase is going to be 10,000 square feet, which is office space, and a large portion of it for building our trucks. But we also have phase 2, which is a mirrored image that's going to be another 10,000 square feet. And phase 3 is an additional 20,000 square feet. Everything that we're building, we're sourcing from other companies in Sauk Prairie. All right, from the truck chassis at Dodge Chrysler to parts from Atlas Fasteners. McFarland's has been a huge help. Everybody's really surrounded us and helped us sustain our growth in this area. It's also a really good proximity to other major interstates. I can go all the way up to La Crosse in 2 hours. I can get down to Milwaukee in an hour and a half. And this has been a very good home point for us.
With thoughtful investments, a vibrant community, a shared vision for tomorrow, and committed community residents, we're crafting a landscape where businesses prosper, families thrive, and possibilities abound. In October of 2024, we began the final phase of Culver Community Park. Slated for completion in July of 2025, Phase 2 will feature 4 newly constructed turf fields, 2 with lights for evening games capable of hosting baseball and softball tournaments for ages 5 to 17U. A centralized concession stand and restroom area will be at the heart of the Diamond Complex. Residents and visitors alike will also enjoy a new all-inclusive playground designed to provide a fun, accessible destination for all. We also broke ground on a new 14,000 square foot child care center, a public and private partnership providing care for 168 children across all socioeconomic and ability levels. Although owned by the Village of Prairie du Sac, this center will be operated by the Sauk Prairie School District. This unique partnership will strengthen the bonds between families, schools, and community resources. These new developments are driving more hotel stays, generating sales tax, and increasing foot traffic that benefits our local shops and services. And it's not just businesses that are growing. It's the vision of entrepreneurs who see the potential in our unique history and our vibrant future. At the base of the bluffs, where the Cistercian nuns of St. Ida's once lived a life of quiet contemplation, a new chapter is unfolding.
Welcome to the Abbey at Otter Creek Guest Lodging and Event Center. When we heard about this property, we thought, what a great opportunity to restore, but then also not just restore it and turn around and sell it, but what if we were to create a business that our family would want to be a part of? The carriage house, which is a 2-bedroom house, the farmhouse and the mansion addition really lend itself to being a great place for short-term rentals like Airbnb, VRBO, that sort of thing. I see it as a great place for people to gather as a group. We also have an on-site spa. And so anybody utilizing the space as a group or even just couples, they can come and schedule some spa services. We have 21 guest rooms for the event space, and event space holds about 250 people. I see like corporate events, wedding events, family reunion events on a larger scale. We'll have a bar on site. We'll have a commercial kitchen for caterers to utilize. Even if somebody wanted to have an outdoor event, we'd have space for that as well. A lot of different things the Sauk Prairie area has to offer are all within 5 to 10 minutes of this property. So really it's kind of a great getaway to be able to come and relax and then still be able to go and explore the local amenities.
The Abbey at Otter Creek is more than a new venture, it's a bold testament to the spirit of Sauk Prairie, a place where history is honored, where entrepreneurs are creating new possibilities, and where community thrives by embracing both its past and its future. With every new investment, we're not just building businesses, we're crafting a legacy of growth, of collaboration, and of opportunity. Sauk Prairie is where the past and future meet, and the possibilities are endless. Bold, collaborative, future-focused. This is Sauk Prairie.
I'd like to invite and welcome Dr. Stephen Deller.
Going to take just a minute to transition the technology here. So I would say get up and get a cup of coffee, but hopefully I don't take that long. And I thought we agreed that I would go before that presentation because that's a tough act to follow. It really is, because it should transition. You know, when I work with communities around the state, a lot of them are asking for examples of other places that they could kind of look at. And I always mention Sauk Prairie because I think that there's a couple of things that the community's doing that is really very, very positive. I think one of the big things is that you're willing to work together. There isn't this kind of competition between Prairie du Sac and Sauk City. There isn't that rivalry competition. You kind of realize that you're in the same boat together and working together is really important. The school district being extremely involved, I think, is extremely important. The other thing is that you're willing to try new things. And a lot of communities, that's scary. They're afraid to try new things because they're afraid of failure. But I think the willingness to try something different, to try something new, and even if it does kind of go over like a lead balloon, you learn from that experience. And I think that's what really sets Sauk Prairie head and shoulders above a lot of other communities around Wisconsin. So I think you should take a minute and kind of pat yourself on the back in terms of a job well done. Now, what I'm going to do for the next 45 minutes or so is kind of talk about, well, a couple of things. Uh-oh, I pulled up the wrong presentation. Morgan? Where's Morgan? That's tomorrow's presentation. I apologize.
Previews of coming attractions.
Previews of coming attractions. I really apologize. And Mackenzie, I brought, some of you met Mackenzie. Mackenzie's a graduate student of mine, and she wanted to be an extension specialist like me. So she wanted to get some exposure to this kind of work. This is not how you start off. Come on, come on. Does that look better? So, three things. One is some general macroeconomic trends. What's happening to the larger economy? Kind of to get us started with. And then kind of a focus on Sauk County. And with a little bit of a focus on housing, because one of the things that economists like to look at, if you want to kind of get an idea of what's happening to the local economy, you kind of look at the housing market. That's kind of an indicator of the local economic activity. So I want to spend some time talking about housing. And I think that's an issue that I know that Sauk Prairie has been struggling with for a number of years, and I think it's going to continue to be kind of the elephant in the room that you need to continue to be thinking about. And then also to do some forecasts in terms of what we think the economy is going to be looking like in the short term. These are kind of the current headlines talking about the economy. As we kind of transition into 2025, what do we think 2025 is going to look like? And when we were talking last year and the year before, the tone of the discussion is, are we going to go into a recession or are we going to go into a soft landing? All the indicators pointed towards we were heading towards an economic slowdown. Well, the tone has changed. The general tone is that 2025 looks like it's going to be a good year, okay? Except there's a couple things. The OECD notes there's some significant risks. The U.S. News and World Report also pointed out that with the change in the administration, that there are going to be some risks out there that may affect the economy. And three of these risks are the Trump risks. One is tariffs. Second is mass deportation. And then policy uncertainty. One of the things that we kind of learned from Trump's first administration is that there was a fair amount of chaos, if you will. There was a lot of kind of lurching from one issue to the next issue. Now, economists kind of think about that in one of two ways. One is that kind of creates chaos, which is bad for the economy because we're uncertain of what's going to be happening, what kind of policy ideas are going to be coming out there, what kind of things are going to be thrown out. For example, I think there's going to be a proposal to change the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Those kind of things just kind of creates chaos and uncertainty. That would be bad for the economy. There's a counter argument that basically says that when you go back and you look at the first Trump administration, not a whole lot got accomplished. Not a whole lot changed. Ooh, that's good. Because then we're kind of the status quo. Okay? While there may be issues that we need to deal with, there's no radical changes. There's nothing really to kind of shock the economy. So that kind of lessons learned from the first administration, there could be a good side to it, there could be a bad side to it, and we don't know. It has to play out. But the tariffs. This is kind of the history of U.S. tariffs. And you can see that kind of starting in the 1960s and with the Nixon administration, there was kind of this movement towards more of a globalized economy. We wanted to open up trade amongst the countries. Okay, and one of the ways that we did that is that we started to get rid of the tariffs. If we get rid of tariffs, that opens up free trade. Okay, one of the things that occurred under the Bush administration, the first Bush, the father, was NAFTA, opening up free trade between Mexico, America, and Canada. There's talk of trying to create greater trade amongst the countries. Now, Trump has suggested that, no, we don't want that, okay? We need to protect and promote American industry, and one way to do that is to restrict trade, and a major way to do that is to impose tariffs. Now, last week, some anonymous sources in the transition team said, well, you know, these tariffs are going to be kind of targeted and you know, we're kind of not that, don't worry about that. That's not going to happen. Well, President-elect Trump immediately responded and said, nope, all the tariffs are on the board. Okay, this, if that happens, could be really bad. Okay? If you look at the U.S. economy, about 11% of our gross domestic product goes to exports. Okay? A large part of our economy is dependent upon trade. Now, we can argue about that trade deficit that we export a lot less than we import. We can have that discussion, and that could be a legitimate discussion. The thing is that since, you know, kind of the Clinton administration, we see this explosion. Our economies have become so integrated and so interdependent, okay, that it's really difficult to kind of break that trade apart. For example, a lot of U.S. car manufacturing takes place in Canada and Mexico. If we put up a trade barrier between Canada and Mexico related to car manufacturing, who's going to get hit the hardest by that? Ford and GM. Okay? I always I use this as an example with my students when I talk about this kind of international trade. Is suppose you want to support American manufacturing and you're going to go buy a new car, okay? Do you want to buy a Ford, an American company that's made in Mexico, or do you want to buy a Toyota that's a Japanese company that is actually built in Alabama? Okay? Our economies have become so intergrained that it's really difficult to just simply say, boop, we're going to put a huge tariff on. That's going to cause havoc in the economy. Okay? So there's real concern about that. Now, is there concern about this trade deficit? Yeah, we need to think about that. We need to worry about that. But putting in massive tariffs could actually derail the economy quite significantly. If you look at Wisconsin, Wisconsin actually exports to foreign countries about $28 billion. You can see the different industry, industrial machinery. This is actually, Wisconsin's really got a very strong footprint in industrial. This is the industry that makes it. You go into a manufacturing facility and you see those really complex machines that are making stuff. A lot of those are made in Wisconsin, okay? We export a lot of that stuff. So if we start, imposing tariffs, if we impose tariffs, a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico, do you think Canada and Mexico are going to go, okay, that's fine, we'll just take that? Of course they're going to retaliate. Okay? They're going to impose their tariffs. They're going to impose their own tariffs, and it's going to create real serious problems. The other thing that is kind of important is that there's this perception that is being argued that the companies or the countries that we impose the tariffs on, they pay the tariff. Who pays the tariff? The consumer does. If we impose a sales tax, right, you can think of a tariff as kind of like a sales tax. Who pays the sales tax? We do, okay? So what's going to happen to the rate of inflation if suddenly there's a 25% tariff? Prices are going to spike, okay? That type of stuff is really going to wreak havoc with the U.S. economy. Now, for us, Wisconsin, the discussions between Mexico and Canada are particularly important, okay, because that's where a lot of our trading is coming from. The paper industry in Wisconsin, where do you think the bulk of the pulp that makes the paper, where do you think the bulk of that comes from? It comes from Canada. So if there's a massive tariff on Canada, who's going to take it on the chin? The Wisconsin paper industry. Okay, one of the tariffs that was imposed under for the first Trump administration, and the Biden administration kept it, is a tariff on aluminum. Okay, how do you think that's negatively impacting Wisconsin? Who cares?
Beer cans.
Beer cans. Beer cans. Wisconsin does a lot of canning of vegetables. The Central Sands, a lot of the vegetable production there, most of that vegetable production either goes flash frozen or it goes into cans. The vegetable processing industry in Wisconsin is really struggling because the price of the aluminum cans is killing them. And the reason it's killing them is because of the tariffs. Okay? Matter of fact, I heard that the price of the can actually costs more than the vegetables that go into the can. And that's only because of the tariff that was put on. We need to think about these things. Now, this is an estimate for Sauk County. Okay? Now, these are very crude estimates, so you got to take them with a grain of salt. I debated about sharing them or not. But I wanted to kind of give this as an idea is that for Sauk County, there's about $500 million of Sauk County product that is actually exported out of the U.S. So not only would these tariffs impact Wisconsin, but they would impact companies that are inside Sauk County. Now, how that would exactly play out, the devil's in the details. But this is something that we simply cannot dismiss. Now, the economic forecast, if you've been to these in the past, you know that I rely on the Wall Street Journal. They do a survey of economists and companies that do economic forecasting. And the most current one we have is the October 2024. The January one which I was hoping would be available today, isn't due out for like a week or 10 days, okay? But I'll come back to this. One of the questions that they asked last time is if former President Trump has proposed imposing broad-based tariffs on imported goods, how would such a policy affect domestic manufacturing relative to if no policy were to be put in place? 59% said it would negatively impact manufacturing employment in the U.S., okay? About 25% said it won't have that much of an impact. Okay, there's 16% that said it would actually increase manufacturing employment. That's the logic. That 15% are essentially saying that by putting up tariffs, you're essentially limiting competition. It allows U.S. manufacturing to be more competitive and be able to produce more. That's the logic. Only 16% of the forecasters kind of agree with that. The majority say, this is not a good idea. Okay, this is really not a good idea. And all you have to do is look at Ford, and where does Ford do most of its manufacturing, okay? The second potential risk is immigration policy, mass deportation, okay? We can talk about the security of the southern border and the Canadian border in terms of who's coming in and out of the country. That is a legitimate concern, and we do need to know who's coming in and out of the country. I mean, that's legitimate. But the question about, well, we're just going to deport all the undocumented workers, all the undocumented illegal immigrants. We're just going to kick them all out. That could really nail the U.S. economy, okay? Why? Because a lot of these undocumented workers, these immigrant workers, are willing to take low-paying jobs. In Wisconsin, the dairy industry, farm dairy, is highly dependent upon immigrant workers. We don't know how many are legal and how many are undocumented. It's really hard to kind of put a figure on that. Now, Wisconsin Politics was doing a story on this, and they asked me to kind of say, well, what would happen if Wisconsin lost all of its undocumented workers? And it's like, well, that's really hard to say because it's really difficult to kind of come up with an estimate. Well, there's a group out there that said, well, they kind of came up with an estimate of how many undocumented workers are in Wisconsin. And that same group said that there's about 5,000 that are working in agriculture. How accurate that number is, I don't know. I think it's kind of ballpark. Okay, I might be a little on the high side. But as a kind of a hypothetical, what if there were 5,000 undocumented workers working in the dairy industry, okay, and they all disappeared? What would happen to the Wisconsin dairy economy? It would result in a loss of about 14,000 jobs through the multiplier effect. It would impact about $4.5 billion worth of industrial output, okay? In terms of the contribution of dairy farming to the state's economy, almost 30% can be traced to the work that's being done by those undocumented workers. If we eliminated all the undocumented workers, or we eliminated immigrant workers, okay, a lot of dairy farms in Wisconsin could no longer function. Become dependent on that. This isn't talking about like the tourist industry, the Wisconsin Dells. How many of the workers in the Wisconsin Dells are immigrant workers? And we're not talking, what's the summer visa program? J1. J1? Yeah, we're not talking about J1, okay? Okay. Our economies become really highly dependent on a lot of these immigrant workers. Simply mass deporting them would create a serious, serious problem for the labor market. That's a different issue than whether or not the borders are secure. Two different issues, okay? Now, what's happening to the economy? Okay, there's a couple of different measures here that I want to look at. One is personal consumption expenditures. That's kind of the blue line. Real gross domestic product. Real means essentially we've taken out the effects of inflation, okay? And then gross private domestic investment. This goes all the way back to just after World War II. Notice that gross domestic product, there's been steady growth. You can see some evidence of some of the recessions. You can see a little bit of the, remember in 1991, remember when Clinton was running and the quote was, "It's the economy, stupid"? You can see a little bit of evidence there. You can see evidence of the Great Recession, and you can see COVID. It's kind of, we turned the economy on and off. okay? You can also see in terms of domestic investment, you can see more kind of economic swings. Domestic investment is a little bit more sensitive to what's happening to the economy, okay? So we see fairly strong growth, but what's happening more recently? This is the percent change right before COVID, during COVID, and then after COVID. You can see how we the impact of COVID, basically that's 1 quarter. That's a 3-month period. We shut the economy down. How many remember, not going out of the house? Okay, we shut the economy down. And then we basically turned it back on again. Well, the economy's not set up to be turned on and off like that. There were lingering effects of that. And it was during that kind of time period that there was a lot of discussion about whether or not we're going to go into a recession. But what's really kind of happening here in the post, so what I want to do with the next slide is I just want to take that that spike period out to get a more clearer handle. Notice what's happened in personal consumption and GDP. There was one period, the first quarter of 2022, that GDP dipped down negative. Other than that, it's been consistently positive. Okay, we've been experiencing steady growth in gross domestic product and personal consumption expenditures. Okay, indeed, you look over this time period, that's pretty steady growth. So when we were talking last year and the year before that, and we were talking about the risk of a recession, there's nothing there. Okay, the economy is actually doing quite well, thank you very much. Okay, this is kind of why a lot of those outlooks now, 2025 is looking rosy because there's no signs of a recession here. Okay, everything is actually looking quite good. 2025 should be a good year. Okay, now what about unemployment? This is going back I went back to 1990 because that's as far back as the Sauk County data can go that I can find. That's easy to, I'll be honest with you, I could go over to the library and start copying it down by hand, and I love you guys, but not that much. So this doesn't go back nearly as far. There is one thing here I want to point out to you, is that Wisconsin and the U.S. data is seasonally adjusted. This is monthly, and it's seasonally adjusted. The Sauk County data is not seasonally adjusted, so I had to do a little transformation there to make them comparable. So what I did is I took a 12-month moving average. This is getting complicated. All I'm saying is that notice that in the Great Recession, it looks like Sauk County is kind of lagging behind in terms of no, that's just the way that I did the seasonal adjustment, okay? Same thing with the Great Reset, or with the COVID shock. That's just simply the way that I had to adjust the data so we can make comparisons. But I think the key here is that the takeaway here is that the unemployment rate is actually looking pretty good. Indeed, if you look at Wisconsin, Wisconsin is historically below the U.S. average. People in Wisconsin want to work. We generally have a lower unemployment rate than the national average. Also note that Sauk County tends to have a lower unemployment rate yet again. Most recently, we have an unemployment rate for the state of Wisconsin of 2.9% and for Sauk County of 2.3%. Okay, I've used the joke before, you put 10 economists in a room and you ask them a question, you're going to get 20 different answers. I guarantee you put 100 economists in the room and you ask them, when do you start to experience a labor shortage? 100% of them are going to come back and say, you get less than 3%, you're in a labor shortage. So right now, Sauk County and Wisconsin is experiencing a labor shortage. How many of you are business owners and you could advertise and you can find workers like that? Okay, we got a labor shortage. That's an issue. That's why that mass deportation is a potential concern. It's a potential problem. Okay? Now, I've shared this before. This is called the JOLTS data. And what this is this is only looking at Wisconsin. We don't have this data sub-Wisconsin or sub the state level. So I think if we had Sauk County data, it would look very similar to this. There are two things that are up here. One is the number of job openings. Okay, that's kind of the green line. And then the number of unemployed people, people that are actively looking for work. That's the red line. That black dashed line is simply the ratio of the two. Okay? Notice that from coming out of the Great Recession, 2010 or 2011 up until about 2016, notice that the number of job openings is much less than the number of unemployed. We had a surplus of labor. That ratio of openings to unemployment is below 1. Now, in about 2016, that ratio flipped and went positive. The number of job openings was greater than the number of unemployed. So from about 2016 up until COVID, we had a period of labor shortage. We had more job openings than we had people to fill the jobs. Okay? Now, you add on top of that, and you say, we can't really pay our workers very much because our margins are so thin, i.e. dairy farmers. Okay? Where are you going to find the workers? Okay? What pool of workers are willing to work for those low wages in this kind of an environment? It tends to be immigrant workers, particularly undocumented workers. Okay? Then COVID hits. But look at now post-COVID. We have a lot more job openings than we have people to fill those jobs. And that's all the way up until, that's October of last year, which is the most current. We have a structural labor shortage. And it's not because of COVID. We had a structural labor shortage before COVID. Okay, that's why there's this kind of mass deportation is a concern. Now, what's the other thing that was really news is inflation. I got a couple of things up here. One is the Consumer Price Index. That's kind of the headline. That's what a lot of newspapers, they pay attention to the Consumer Price Index. The Federal Reserve Bank, however, they prefer to use the Personal Consumption Expenditure Index. Okay, we can get into details in terms of why that's a better measure than the Consumer Price Index. But we seem to continue to use the Consumer Price Index because oftentimes that's what's built into federal law. For example, if there's a cost of living adjustment for Social Security, it's based on the Consumer Price Index. That's why we continue to pay attention to that. But, and the other thing is the CPI and the PCE, and then the core. The core is essentially taking out food and energy. Now, why do you want to take food and energy out of the price index? Food and energy prices tend to bounce around a lot. Okay? The price of eggs. Okay? Why did the price of eggs go up? Bird flu. Bird flu. We basically lost millions of egg-laying hens because of bird flu. They had to be killed. So if you take that production out, what happens to supply? Supply drops. If the demand for eggs remains the same, what happens to price? Boop. Okay? Since bird flu hit, they've been able to restock the hen-laying population. What's happened to the price of eggs? It's come back down. Okay? What happened to the price of gasoline, about 3 years ago? What happened about 3 years ago that caused energy prices to go bing, bing, bing? Who invaded Ukraine? Okay? Those two sectors, food and energy, there's a lot of instability in those two markets. So we take that noise out. So we look at the core. Now, there are two periods here that I want to point to. How many of you remember Jimmy Carter just passed away? The economy during the later years of Jimmy Carter's term and the first couple of years of Ronald Reagan's term. Any of you remember living through that? What was a real serious concern? Inflation, right? That's that period that's highlighted there. Look at more recently, all right? We went through years of relatively low, modest inflation. And then all of a sudden, boom, it jumped up. Okay, that is a concern. It's something that we hadn't experienced for a long, long time. Okay, if we look more recently, This is 2019 up to the most current number, which is November of last year. Okay, you can see steady inflation changes. You can see the effects of COVID. Prices kind of went down a little bit because everybody was at home. Nobody was spending any money. And then you can see it kind of starting to accelerate from 21 up into 2022, and then it starts to flatten out a little bit. So there was an acceleration, okay? And part of the indication was is that overheating the economy, is it the labor shortage? It was a bunch of things that were coming together. It was the Federal Reserve responding to this increase in the inflation rate that caused them to kind of drop down, to spike up interest rates, to kind of slow the economy down, to kind of cool off inflation. Inflation is now back down to where it had been. It's not back to where it was before COVID, but it's getting very, very close to it, okay? Indeed, this is a percent change from one period to the next. You can see very low rates of inflation before COVID, then the recovery kind of turned the economy. But you can see in 2021, 2022, those are kind of high rates of inflation, okay? That's something that we hadn't experienced for a long time. But notice that over 2023 and 2024, it's come back down, okay? So inflation, from a historical perspective, is kind of tamed. Okay, now what about Sauk County? One of the things that's really striking me about Sauk County is the commute patterns. The 2023 Census American Community Survey came out about a month ago, so this is hot off the presses. This is the percent or the share of workers who live in Sauk County, but they commute out of the county for work. Historically, that's been about 23, 24%. But what's happened over the last couple of years, particularly in 2023? It spiked. The number of people that live here in the county but work outside the county has spiked. Okay? Something's going on. Okay? Indeed, if you look at the mean commute time, same thing. People are commuting longer. Well, you can't say in terms of longer distances with this, but they're taking more time to commute. Okay? What's going on here? I shared with you this last year. This is some work that a colleague of mine, Matt Kears, has done. It's called stretch commuting. It's essentially saying, looking at patterns of people that commute more than 50 miles one way to work. Okay? If you look back in 2006, which was the beginning of the time period that Matt looked at, you can see that it's really not that many. It's pretty modest. When we go to 2019, the number of people that are stretch commuting more than 50 miles has exploded. We think, and it's actually going to be part of McKinsey's dissertation work, is we want to update this and look at this after COVID. What do you think this is going to look like after COVID? Ooh, the other way.
Work from home. What is work from home going to do?
Okay. This is the percent of people that work from home. Okay. Notice the spike up. But we tend to talk about remote work as either on or off. Either you're working completely from home, or you're working completely at your place, wherever your place of employment is. I think what's happening is that we're going to hit a period of hybrid work. Okay? You can work from home 3 or 4 days a week if your occupation allows you to do that. Okay? But you have to be in the office 1 or 2 days a week. So I only have to commute 1 or 2 days. What does that do to my commuting shed? If I have to commute into the office every day of the week, or 5 days a week, right? How far am I willing to commute? Not that far. But if I only have to commute 1 day a week or 2 days a week, how far am I willing to commute now? Much farther. I think that commuting shed is going to explode. Okay? But that's McKinsey's dissertation work. We'll have an answer for you in a couple of weeks. Maybe next year we'll have an answer for that, okay? Now, this, I think, is going to have major implications for Sauk County. okay? Because what is one of the largest growing metropolitan areas in the state of Wisconsin? What is one of the largest growing cities in the state of Wisconsin right now? Madison. What are you within commuting distance of? Madison. What is it that one of the couples, that was the first couple that was interviewed on the video, what were they saying? If I have a job in Madison and I don't have to be down there one day a week, what is that, I'm going to start looking for someplace that's really kind of cool to live. And Sauk Prairie kind of fits that bill. Okay? Now, how is that going to play out? I think you're seeing it in the housing market. Okay? And I want to spend a little bit more time talking about the housing. This is the housing index, all transaction housing prices index. This is for Sauk County, Dane County, Iowa County, and Columbia County. This goes back to 1986. You can see two things here. You can see that bubble that started to occur in 2006. That bubble is what popped and caused the Great Recession. What's happened post-COVID? Housing prices have gone through the roof. Okay, how many of you have been in the housing market recently? What's happened to housing prices? Through the roof. Okay? And you can see that. Now, this is from Redfin. This is all, you can all download this data and look at it yourself. How many of you are familiar with Redfin? Okay, how many of you have heard of Zillow? Redfin is a competitor to Zillow. I like Redfin because they make their data available and they don't charge. Okay? So this is the data from Redfin going back to November of 2014. It doesn't go back any farther than that. Notice that there's a nice natural upward growth, right? And then something happened in 2020 and suddenly that growth rate shifted up. Okay? That kink in 2020, right? That's showing up right there for Sauk County, okay? Now, how is Sauk County compared to the rest of the market? This is kind of a noisy graph. There's a lot on here. A couple things. This is a regional housing market, okay, because that commuting shed is getting bigger and bigger. Not surprisingly, the typical median housing sale price is highest in Dane County. Sauk County kind of follows along, but notice that Sauk County tends to be bumping up highest compared to the other comparison counties. Okay. Now Iowa County, Iowa County is technically a metropolitan county. If you drive through Iowa County, do you think metropolitan county? No. But it is, by definition, a metropolitan county. Why? Because of commuting patterns. I think when we redo the metropolitan areas, 10 years from now, well, not 10 years from now, when the next decennial census comes out and they update this stuff, I bet you, well, I won't bet you a steak dinner because it's a sucker bet. I'll bet you one of the muffins back there. I bet you the Sauk County would become a metropolitan county because of commuting patterns. Okay? One of the questions is, well, the reason prices of houses are going up is because we're only building bigger houses. Okay? Developers are, if a developer has a choice between building 2 starter homes or 1 McMansion, which one makes more money for the developer? The McMansion. So we're seeing a lot of the housing that's being built tends to be higher scale. So the reason the price of housing is going up is because we're building bigger houses. Well, one way to kind of adjust for that is to look at the median price per square foot of house. Well, that's bigger houses is not explaining it. Okay? It's across the board. Even starter homes are becoming more expensive. Okay? And again, this is the median sale price. Whoops, I went the wrong way. Sorry about that. This is the data for Sauk City and Prairie du Sac. A little bit more noise in here because the market's not as big. Because it's a smaller market, there's more variation, and so that's why it's jumping around a little bit more. But you can see again in 2020 or thereabouts, you can kind of see it starting to tick up a little bit. Sauk City, there's a $1 million house that sold. Okay? So you get this down to individual municipalities across the state of Wisconsin. The percent of houses that sold above asking price, this is something in Madison. It got to be a game amongst realtors to see who could get the highest above asking price bid. We had a little rental house that we sold. We decided we didn't want to be landlords anymore, and we sold it. And we asked what we thought was a very greedy price. And within 24 hours, there were people getting into bidding wars going above the asking price. And it's like, geez, this is crazy. Okay? This is really kind of noisy. This is for, again, the comparison counties. But you can see kind of the bump up in 2020, and then it's kind of plateaued a little bit. It's still competitive. It's not back down to where it was before COVID. Okay? This is really noisy, but again, I'll just share the data with you. Another way of looking at it is the percent of housing prices that they actually dropped the asking price. They put it on the market, nothing really happened, they dropped the asking price. There's no real pattern there. The only thing you can see there is there are certain, if you're selling your house, don't list it in November, wait until spring. If you're buying a house, buy it in December and January. Okay, and again, this is the county's comparison. There's not much there. Okay, and again, this is Prairie to Sauk and Sauk City. Again, there's not much of a pattern there. Okay, now, one of the things that they provide is the average monthly supply. This is something that real estate agents use as kind of a rule of thumb, if you will, to look at the housing market. They kind of say that if there is a less than 4-month supply of housing, generally that's a seller's market. There's a shortage of housing on the market. Housing is not sitting on the market very long, okay? If there's 6 months or above, then that's a buyer's market. There's a surplus of housing. Look at what's happened post-COVID, okay? Consistently across the area, there is a very low monthly supply of housing. So what that's suggesting is that there's a housing shortage. Okay? Houses go on the market and they sell really quickly. Okay, and again, that's the same data for Prairie to Sauk and Sauk City. You look at the average since January 2020, looking at 3.1 and 3.4% below that 4-month threshold. So Sauk City and Prairie to Sauk, by this measure, is a housing shortage. But I don't think that comes as a surprise to anybody. Okay? Now, the new listings. There's 2 ways that you can address the housing supply. One is more houses get listed. The other is you build more. What's happening to the long-term trend for Sauk County in terms of monthly new housing listing? It's going down. Why do you think it's trending downward? Exactly. People are hanging onto their houses because of what's happening to interest rates. I've shared this with you before. My wife and I refinanced our house. Our mortgage rate, and we're empty nesters. We, by theory, should be looking at downsizing. We should be selling the family home and moving into someplace a little bit smaller, right? We're at that age. We should be thinking about doing that, okay? Our mortgage right now is 2.1%. If we sold our house and refinanced and bought a new house, what do you think the mortgage rate would be looking at? 6.5%, 7%. Why in the hell would we do that? Well, other people are thinking the exact same thing. So that supply, that natural churn of new houses coming on the market is not happening. The other problem is new building that's going on. Okay, this is something that the census collects. This is the number of new building permits for residential property. Now, this is a building permit. This doesn't mean that they actually build it. They apply for a permit. Doesn't mean they actually do it. Now, look at what the pattern was like before the Great Recession. There seemed to be kind of an equilibrium there of a number of years of an average number of new housing coming online, okay, in terms of building permits. You can see the Great Recession. We never got back, except for Dane County. Dane County got back up to where it was, okay? We're not seeing as much housing being built. And the little bit of housing that we are seeing built tends to be higher end. Why? Because developers can make more money building higher end. This is something the community's been dealing with for a number of years, and I think it's going to continue to be an issue. Now, why focus on housing here? If the labor market area around Madison is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and Sauk Prairie is inside of that commuting zone, and the demand is going to be higher and higher, what's going to be the one thing that's going to be a bottleneck to that growth? Housing. Okay? So you're experiencing growth, but until housing can be addressed, there's going to be a limit. Okay? Now, what's the future of the economy look like? This is the index of leading economic indicators that's put together by the Conference Board. Okay? This goes back a time period. What we want to look at here is really kind of the blue line. The blue line is the index of leading economic indicators. The black line is kind of their measure, their coincidence index, which is kind of their measure of how the economy is doing. Okay? Look at since the beginning of about 2022. That index has been going down. That's why through this entire time period, people have been talking about, ooh, we're going to go into a recession. Is it going to be a recession or is it going to be a soft landing? All of the leading economic indicators are pointing towards a recession. Okay? What happened to the last month of indicator, which would be November of 2024? It ticked up. It's the first time the leading indicators has ticked up in over 2 years. That's why the outlook for 2025 tends to be positive. This is what goes into the index. And the two things that are kind of driving it is building permits and private housing has gone up, what we were just talking about. It's starting to pick back up from a national perspective. The other thing is the stock market. Stock market. Those two things are basically driving that leading indicator to tick up a little bit. Okay? That's what led it. Okay? So, the headline story here is that with this uptick of the leading indicators, November's gain, the leading economic indicators no longer signals an impending recession. Okay? The data is starting to say that fear of a recession seems to have gone away. Okay, now, the Wall Street Journal forecast. Again, this is from October, and there's been some new data that's been released. This is the average forecast, and then what I did, again, is take the average and then compute a standard deviation, added the standard deviation, subtracted the standard, kind of give range. The forecast for real GDP growth in the third quarter of 2024, the average forecast was 2.4%. What did it come in at? It came in at 2.9%. Much stronger than what folks have been forecasting. The economy did better than we were forecasting. So I think when the January estimates come out, all of these forecasts are going to be bumped up a little bit. Okay? So the forecast of 1.7%, 1.7, and then kind of an upgrowth a little bit, kind of a slowdown and then a bit of a recovery. I think when the new forecasts come out, those averages are going to be bumped up a little bit. Either way, it's looking like positive economic growth throughout 2025. Okay? Real GDP going out to 2027. We have a hard enough time forecasting a year from now. Trying to forecast out several years into the future, that's like plain craps, okay? The point being here is that there's nothing on the horizon that looks like it's going to derail the economy. What about the unemployment rate? Again, I think that the idea is that there'd be a little bit of a tick up, but generally the unemployment rate is going to be stable and downward trending. I think when the new forecasts come out and they reflect that really good third quarter GDP growth, I think these forecasted unemployment rates are actually going to be ticking down a little bit. So the unemployment rate nationally looks good. Now, if the unemployment rate nationally is ticking down, what do you think that's going to do for the Wisconsin unemployment rate? It's probably going to tick down too. Okay, what about Sauk County? Tick down too. If we're already in a labor shortage, it looks like that labor shortage is going to get worse. Okay, and that's independent of what we do with immigration. Okay, core consumer price index. The forecast is that we seem to have inflation under control. We're going to be down to around 2%. Are we going to hit that magic number the Federal Reserve Bank wants of 2%? Probably not, but we're going to be really, really close to it. Okay? So inflation looks like it's going to be tamed. The consumer price index, same idea. Now, what about interest rates? This is a forecast of the 10-year Treasury notes. And the idea here is that the interest rates are going to be kind of steady, if downward ticking a little bit. Part of this is the idea is the Federal Reserve has been cutting interest rates. Okay? Now, the big discussion is the Federal Reserve going to continue to cut interest rates? Okay, if they continue to cut interest rates, these are going to continue to downward tickle. Okay? So interest rates look stable, downward trending. There is discussion now that with the economy looking so good, why should the Federal Reserve Bank continue to reduce interest rates? The economy's doing fine. Why don't we just leave interest rates where they are right now? Okay, so it's kind of, we don't know. Trying to second guess what the Federal Reserve Bank is going to do, it's like trying to figure out who's going to win, the Bears or the Packers. Growing up a Bears fan, never mind. I'll keep going. The fear here, and one of the things I want to point out with is Treasury notes. The Treasury notes is when the federal government runs a deficit. How do we pay for that deficit? We go into debt. How do we do that? We do it by selling Treasury notes. Okay, people buying Treasury notes is what pays for the deficit. Okay, now the fear with the tariffs and starting a trade war is who do you think owns a lot of those Treasury notes? China. Saudi Arabia owns a lot of our Treasury notes. Japan, South Korea, China. If we started serious trade war with China, what if China decides, two can play that game. One, we're going to impose our own tariffs on you. Okay, and they've got other things they can do. But what scares me is they say, you know all those Treasury notes we own? We're going to sell them all. What will happen to the markets if China decides they're going to flood the market and sell all their Treasury notes? What's going to happen? Boom. We still got to sell Treasury notes because we're still running a huge deficit. What are we going to do to convince people to continue to buy new Treasury notes when the market's flooded with them? We got to spike up interest rates. What's that going to do to the interest rates that you and I face? Boom. Okay, that's why these trade wars, very risky. Very, very risky. Okay, one of the things that they ask these, what are the probability of a recession in the next 12 months? There's one person that said there's a 50-50 chance. There are three that said there's more than a 50-50 chance of a recession. The vast majority said about 1 in 4 chance of a recession, okay? Never do, I mean, there's one person that said a 1% chance. I mean, you never put down a 0% chance because stuff happens, okay? So there's always a possibility of a recession. But unlike 2 years ago, where, it was way up there, 75% probability of a recession, that's all changed now. That whole tone of discussion has changed. So no longer are we talking about, is there going to be a recession or a soft landing? Now the discussion is, how strong is the growth going to be? Okay? So what does this mean? The immediate outlook of the economy looks positive. It looks good. Okay? Reasonable unemployment and inflation rates. Indeed, unemployment is a labor shortage. There's going to be downward pressure on interest rates. Okay? The two Trump potential economic policies of tariffs and mass deportations could threaten that positive economic outlook. The tariffs in particular. Okay? There's a question about mass deportation. Do we have the capacity to even carry out the policy? Okay? There was I forget the name of the border czar, but he put in a proposal to Congress that says, in order for us to do the mass deportation, we need an increase in the budget of ICE in order to do this. Guess how much that budget request was? $82 billion. That's the estimate in order to do this mass deportation. Okay? They need to quadruple the number of ICE agents. We're in a labor shortage. Where are these people going to come from? Okay? So there's a real question about whether or not we can even implement a mass deportation. Okay? So of the two threats, I think the tariffs is the bigger threat. Okay? Now, the increase in stretch commuting, because of the increase in hybrid work, the increase in the number of people working from home, okay, coupled with the proximity to Madison and Middleton, relatively more affordable housing in the Sauk Prairie area, is really uniquely positioned to experience significant economic growth. Okay, I think the cards are lining up quite nicely for this region to really experience strong economic growth. The big question mark is whether or not you have the housing stock to support that. And what's the last one? Oh, will the supply of housing allow that growth to occur? And I'll stop with that and see if you've got any questions.
Okay, we are going to open up for Q&A. Tawana has a microphone, and she's running around, so she'll come find you if you raise your hand.
Good morning, and thank you. The Treasury notes that are held by these foreign countries, are they held by the country themselves, or are they held by foreign nationals?
Both.
Is it a relatively equal proportion? Because obviously, if they're held by individuals, those individuals will choose what to do with their investments, as opposed to a country that's going to choose to retaliate and bulk sell off their assets.
That's a good question, and I'm not sure I have a very good answer for you. But if you're talking China, right, if the Chinese government tells banks to sell their treasury notes, what do you think those banks are going to do? Okay, Saudi Arabia, they're the big holder, right? It's the same kind of situation. If the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia decides we're going to sell them, they're going to sell them. Now, the question is why would Saudi Arabia do that? They know that if they flood the market, it would trigger a massive recession in the U.S., which would cause the U.S., the whole world economy to go into a recession. They'd be shooting themselves in the foot. So Saudi Arabia doesn't make sense. China's playing a long game. Okay? They're not interested about their quarterly profit reports. They're looking 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. So China's the wild card in this. And who are we targeting most of our tariff threats to? China. Okay? So a lot of these foreign, like South Korea, why would they flood the market? They'd be shooting themselves in the foot. But when you get into a trade war, a tariff war, things can get nasty. It's a risk that's out there that I don't think we're talking enough about.
Hey, Steve. It's on, right?
Yeah.
Reserve. Is that an indication that there may be a policy to let the dollar collapse rather than raise interest rates, pay back our debt, basically default on our debt, and protect ourselves by increase a lot in value at that point?
I don't understand Bitcoins. As an economist, there's nothing backing them up. I don't understand Bitcoin, okay? So I can't answer that part of the question. But in terms of just going, well, let's just go ahead and default, that would we'd be talking another Great Depression, okay? And that's why when, the federal government is always coming up to the debt limit and then they play games and they go up to the last minute to pass the debt limit, it's like you're playing with fire. Because if the U.S. government defaults, we are the kind of, one of the reasons, why do you think so many people buy Treasury notes? The risk of a Treasury note going bad is zero. It's risk-free. That's why people pay so much attention to it, okay? If we default, basically all those Treasury notes are worthless. And it would make the Great Depression look like nothing. Bitcoin, I don't understand Bitcoin. I really don't. I know that's not satisfactory, but.
I'm sorry, I'd like to know your thoughts on the commercial property coming up due to the interest rates changing from when you first bought a 5-year note ago at 3.5%, 4%. Now they're at 7, 7.1, 7.2. If the rate don't go down, how many of these commercial properties are going to be going underwater? Do you have a feeling or a thought on that? Because it seems like there's quite a few out there that could.
That's a good question. I think that the mortgage rates are going to be starting to tick down a little bit, but not enough. Back when I refinanced my house, I don't think we're going to see interest rates like that for a long, long time. I think that was a unique fluke, if you will. So I think we're going to see a new normal of mortgage rates and interest rates of 5, 6%. And if you look historically, that's about where they're at. And when you think about what determines an interest rate, there are 3 things that determine an interest rate. One, from a banker's perspective, one is a normal rate of return. The banker's got to make a profit. Okay, why would they, why else would they be loaning you money? So they got to make a profit. The second thing is you're paying this back in the future with inflation devalued money. So what do we think the rate of inflation is going to be? If we think the rate of inflation is going to be higher, then the interest rate's going to go up, okay? What was happening to inflation over the last couple of years? Pretty high, okay? What's happening to inflation now? It's coming down. So that's going to put downward pressure on interest rates. The third thing is the risk of default. That's file.
Thinking of a purely remote working individual. Some thought that type of chaos, and then again, the net result not necessarily reflecting a negative among that chaos. Is there something among, within consumer confidence that with all that chaos, that there's a strengthening a mental strengthening of resilience or just, tuning out and that, okay, there's this chaos going on, but we're going to be just fine. I mean, is there a positive take to that amongst your community?
I think there is. I think that's kind of another way of interpreting it. All that nothing's going to happen. There's just all this noise and smoke, but nothing really is. Okay. Is there the potential that people start to turn out? I think that's a real possibility. People just get, I'm tired of all the noise. I'm just going to stop paying attention to what's going on. What does that do to an informed society? Yeah, I don't know about that. But I think that's a potential. How many of you have kind of, after the election, you just kind of said, I'm not watching the news anymore? Now you're definitely not going. Yeah. But when it's chaos like that, people just kind of go, and they just turn it off. And they stop paying attention. In one hand, maybe that.
or something, but I heard on the news today that President Biden has a saving on valuable education plan going into effect, which I guess I don't understand the rationale behind that and how it can truly benefit our nation, but I trust you to be able to explain that to me.
I'm not sure about the Biden policy. I'm not sure what that is. I haven't heard of that one yet. But I agree with you 100%. In Wisconsin, when we imposed the property tax levy limit, a lot of school districts really kind of were facing serious budget shortfalls. And one of the ways I think too many Wisconsin high schools responded is that keeping shop classes open is extremely expensive. Those are not cheap classes. The superintendent of the schools, they're not cheap, are they? And it's much cheaper to hire 2 AP English teachers than it is to keep the shop class open. So I think we made a mistake, and the pendulum swung too far to college prep, college prep, college prep, and kids weren't being exposed to the trades. I think that pendulum is swinging back, and I think we're seeing more schools reinvesting in shop classes to give kids that exposure to those potential career opportunities. I think we made a mistake of kind of sending the signal, go to college, otherwise you're going to be a failure. I think that was a mistake. And I think we're kind of paying the price for it because we saw a lot of kids go to college, they really didn't want to be there, and what do? They accumulated a lot of debt. They accumulated a lot of debt. They decided college is not for me. They stopped, so they don't have the benefit of the degree. And those are the ones that are really paying the price. They got the student debt, they got to pay off, and they don't have the benefits of the degree. I'm glad that a lot of school districts now are kind of coming back to having shop classes in the school districts to be exposed to those kind of things. The other thing that happened is, and this is in the construction trade industry, is that a lot of the apprenticeships in terms of like being a carpenter, being a plumber, being an electrician, they were run by the unions, okay? A lot of the unions have kind of they're not as decisioned as they were. So a lot of those internship type programs or those apprenticeship type programs kind of dried up. I think we're starting to see some of those come back.
Okay, we will take our last question here.
Not a question, just wanted to add some context to that discussion for everybody. Chad Harnish, high school principal. Our students and the data we have from them, they're making different choices about their post-secondary education than they did previous to the pandemic.
Yes.
Typically, pre-pandemic, we would have the two institutions that had the most students attend would be UW-Madison and Madison College, would be typical. About 15 students per year would go to those two schools. The last year I have, and then during the pandemic, we went from about 65% attending post-secondary education of some kind down to about 45%, and we've come back to about 60. We're about 60, 62%. But last year, 8 kids went to Madison, 15 kids went to UW La Crosse, a cheaper four-year college choice, and 33 kids went to Madison College, right? So like double the number of kids that ever went to Madison College pre-pandemic, now post-pandemic. So like kids are making choices about what they're doing for education. And you know, Dick, thank you. We've tried to support that in what we do in school, and it's showing up in the decisions they're making after they leave us.
As a UW-Madison faculty member, I should not be saying this. Because of the credit transfer programs that we have, as an economist, it makes a lot more sense to spend your first year of MATC or your first 2 years at UW La Crosse or UW Whitewater, where my wife used to teach, right? Or Baraboo. Exactly, thank you, right? Do your first couple of years there. It's a hell of a lot cheaper. And then you transfer to UW-Madison, okay? Or you decide after a couple of years, you know, this ain't for me. Okay, I want to go into the trade. And I think we should encourage that. We should, but the problem is that the pendulum went so far that it was basically go to college, go to college, go to college, go to college. Okay, and if you didn't go to college, you felt like you were a failure, and that was the wrong signal to send. And I think we're adjusting. I think we're adjusting that now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Deller.
Thank you.
Probably. If there are any other questions, I'm sure you could catch Dr. Deller quickly on the way out here. But before I let you all go, please get out your red tickets because we're going to draw for a couple of gift cards. Zero 59130. All right, one more. Zero 59143. Woo! Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. Appreciate you being here. Have a great rest of your day, rest of the week, rest of the year. Thank you.